what we do is, as an office of specialists, we do support the DAR agents across the state, but we also do a couple of programs with some support from other external grant sources. And I'll talk about our CHARM program and our green infrastructure programs in a moment. So a picture of us as a whole. So the disaster assessment and recovery agents and our team, our team of specialists, mostly on the left-hand side, but it just kind of shows the presence we do have across the state of Texas. So our office is a team of urban planners, green infrastructure experts, stormwater experts, and GIS professionals. So we provide a lot of sort of technical support about planning and regulations, the land use side, certainly the stormwater drainage, floodplain management programs, and a lot of mapping and sort of technical expertise. So we support the agents as they're out in the field trying to find ways to provide coverage and support for them, but also support planning and mitigation actions. And give me just a quick overview. I'll talk about our CHARM workshops, really a dialogue kind of focused program that we do, as well as some other kind of technical assistance that we do, focused on identifying mitigation projects, whether it be plans or regulations that they could enforce, structural projects that they could be working on, so fixing a roadway or a bridge or something. Some of the other natural systems protection and other sort of communications efforts they could take. So we do the full spectrum from sort of the education all the way through more facilitated technical assistance. We do also provide a Texas Citizen Planner program that we are continuing to update, provide new courses, and find ways to, again, provide local officials in Texas with the base of knowledge they need to really make effective decisions in their communities. But the one program I want to talk a little bit more about, and I know this is sort of a tools for resilient communities. I want to share some lessons learned about a specific program that we've done over time called CHARM. CHARM stands for Community Health and Resource Management, and it's really sort of our planning team's flagship program, I would say. So when I talk about CHARM, I want to talk about sort of our general approach and our platform here, and maybe share some insights about things we've learned, maybe some tools y'all can use in your roles to talk about risk and resilience in your communities. What CHARM is really three pieces. There is some data sets, some GIS processing we do to bring in a variety of state and federal data sets, the census, risk data, the American Community Survey, local parcel and land use data, land cover, to create a data product that we can work with and generalize across the entire state of Texas and the entire United States. So we work to really make this data available, make this scalable and customizable for any variety of contexts, because Texas is a big state. There's a lot of variety across the state, a lot of different capacities. So for us, it was really important that we find a way we can scale this across the state. For those of you that might have some interest in scenario planning applications, we do use a piece of software called CommunityViz to allow participants to interact with mapping data, sort of assess risk, quickly see indicators on floodplain or homes in the floodplain, and sort of assess the impacts of their actions, which we know for a lot of the planners we work with, the local representatives and officials, seeing the impacts of their action is something that might be kind of abstract. So we try to make that more tangible for them. Finally, the last part we have is we want to make it possible for data to be around the table, for it to be something easily accessible. So a program we have is called the We Table, sort of a low cost way to bring interactive data out around the table. So I'll show some pictures of that in a second. What we do with CHARM, this is a program we've built, and we've hosted 29 workshops in the state of Texas since 2015. For context, there are 254 counties in Texas, so we've got 225 to go. But I think we're off to a good start in some of the more urban and coastal counties. But what we do is we, over time, have developed these really customizable, really interactive analyses focusing on future land use. So the planners always enjoy this one, but talking also about identifying other critical facilities, social vulnerability, and looking at loss estimates and mitigation opportunities from other natural hazards. So in Texas, this was something that started right before Hurricane Harvey really hit the Texas coast pretty hard. And I think we've seen a lot of sort of desire for this sort of information following Harvey as the state is working to build up its capacity for planning. In particular, the coastal smaller communities are working to build better planning practices. One thing I'll share is that we are really focusing on making sure that we do need this robust analysis. We know that there are the planners, there are the technical sides of what we do, but we also need to have this, the human dimensions of this work. So we do draw on a bit of sort of collaborative planning, kind of a deliberation and dialogue as part of the decision-making process. So kind of our big key principles here are making sure that this is accessible to anyone, not just GIS experts and planners. Really, literally letting people work around the table, getting the live mapping feedback, and coming to terms with the data in their own words. So, what does it mean to them? How do they interpret it and make meaning of it? But bring a lot of different people and perspectives together. I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of examples from our CHARM platform, just to kind of see the types of data visualization we do, whether it's just visualizing, showing homes in the flood zone areas, so the elected officials can understand the relative risk and the relative hazards in their communities. Showing it on the map, but also showing the how they stack up compared to other parts of the community with graphs. Looking at factors that influence social vulnerability, allowing them to ask questions of the data. So, for example, if there's an area where there's low vehicle access, or there's not a whole lot of, low per capita income, for example, areas where we need to be thinking about, changing our approach to evacuations or ability to rebuild, allowing the community members to work with this data and quickly see a bit more about the areas they can be focusing on. So bringing issues to their attention. And for some of our elected officials too, we know that there are a lot of considerations about, for example, the tax base. What are the impacts? What are the costs of flooding, of doing business as usual? So we do attempt to sometimes put that into a number, do some basic modeling that allows us to see, based on the flood depth here, the number of homes here, here's the, the total losses happening in our community. So depending on your perspective, you can take a lot from these exercises. We do a lot of this also around the table. So I want to just share a couple photos from, the flow of a normal CHARM workshop. Our participants come to terms with the data. They lean into the table. They maybe find their house or their school or their place of work on the map, and begin to identify where they are and what's happening. Over time, they start to have conversations about the data. They bring in their experiences, their stories. They say, actually, when this flood happened, this event happened, there was a lot of water here that we need to really be looking at more. So they bring in their perspectives. They start having conversations about what they're seeing. They share their stories, their experiences, and their perspectives. The gentleman in the light blue polo, I believe, was an elected official in one of these counties, sharing his perspectives on, growth and, the good things that come with growth, but also maybe some of the challenges that come with it. So for this group, it was a really interesting conversation about, sort of the trade-offs and consequences of planning. And we think that having the platform, having the data made it more visible to them. And we also do encourage, a lot of new folks to come to the table. We do work a lot with our state and federal partners. We bring, we mix up our tables a little bit too by the, so you've got the geographic area that you're a part of, but it might be the city, but it might also be this nonprofit. It might be this other agency working with them. So you have these diverse perspectives rather than all the planners at one table, all the engineers at another. We do mix it up and find new ways to work together. But at the end, we do hope that through the workshop, through this education, and through providing them with some of these tools and data, they have some next steps they can take. There's an energy that begins to form and a way for them to work together more effectively in the future. So maybe just a couple thoughts on our experience in Texas with CHARM and with our programs over the past couple of years. And these are things I thought might be more generalizable for, extension professionals working on resilience issues, is that, resilience looks very different in a lot of communities. But we think that a couple ways to address this would be bringing a wide range of stakeholders to the table, not just our planners, but for example, our floodplain administrators, our emergency managers. For example, in Texas, counties have no land use authority, so really weak counties from a land use planning perspective. So the other players, like our floodplain administrators and our EMCs, actually play a huge role in sort of, land use planning in these unincorporated areas. And it does require us to look at, different tools maybe to achieve some of these goals that, of good planning. Because again, the authority, the enabling authority is just not there. So we have to get creative with our solutions and who we work with. I'm going to make a plug. We do have a pretty decent sized GIS shop here, which I feel incredibly lucky to have. But maps and visualizations are really powerful when you are talking about risk and kind of community resilience. These are scary topics. It can be abstract. It can be this happened here once and we see the photos, or it hasn't happened here. But seeing the sheer numbers, seeing the impact on a map can be really powerful, especially even if it's a non-technical audience, people that aren't familiar with mapping. So showing them this risk makes it real, makes it actionable. There's certainly a whole field of risk communication there, but we do think that making it accessible is a really important part of this. And finally, I'll just share that how we define and talk about resilience is something that's changed over the projects and the communities we work in. Some will have a focus on really improving, here are these low water crossing, these issue areas. Others communities will talk a lot more about sort of the social side, the communications, the more social dimensions of resilience. So over time, we've sort of built out exercises, built out this work to be supporting a lot of different exercises, a lot of different focuses here. And I just want to share that perspective too. I know that we'll have some other takes today on sort of what resilience looks like, but I wanted to share these couple perspectives from our end. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions right now. I see a couple things in the Q&A in the chat right now. And if you have a question too, if you raise your hand, I think I can also unmute you too, or allow you to talk if you want to ask directly. So I do see a question, is there a cost for this program? So we feel really fortunate that we've had a lot of substantial grant support from organizations like FEMA Region 6. So we are a cooperating technical partner with FEMA, which means that we've sort of established a working agreement. We've been doing this for about 7 years now. So we do receive grant funding to host county level workshops and across the state of Texas. We've done 29 of those already. We work with we work with our network based on our county extension agents, areas we know that have a lot of flood risk based on some of the data, but also what we hear about community interest and capacity. But we do also focus sort of more, because FEMA is our funder, we do sometimes have to balance areas where that are priorities for updating risk data, for example. So we support a lot of, sort of early steps before a new flood insurance rate maps are released, helping sort of assess the risk and sort of get the community talking. We do largely focus our outreach on some of the stakeholders. So a lot of sort of the local officials and staff and others that are sort of active stakeholders in this, but we have done some workshops that have been more community oriented over time as well. Part of it is just, how many folks can we fit in the room? How do we sort of plan for this and anticipate this? We have, through technical assistance, done some work with communities on comprehensive plan writing and developing zoning maps. So we've had some more sort of community oriented workshops as well. So Myra, hopefully that answers your 2 questions. Great. I see another question here. Can you say more about how this program got started and grew over time? Number of people in the photo is impressive. Are all of them in funded positions? How this program get associated with A&M Extension? So I'll talk a little bit about that. And some of this is sort of the stories I've heard. I've been with A&M for a little under 2 years now. But to zoom back to the picture here, I'll share that. So this program, in particular, I think it's been around in some form since about 2010. It's about 12 years. So one of our program directors is in the left-hand side with the maroon A&M polo. I know that this started as kind of a smaller one-man program. Him and our former director, Dr. John Jacob, who I know used to serve on this board, started the CHARM program. It was originally a more analog kind of tabletop exercise with I think some acetate chips. So looking at land use planning on the map, but the digital form I think didn't start until a couple years after that. Again, built over time with kind of proof of concept, grant funding, and developed it over time. Sort of the complexity and info there. So sort of the left third of this photo is our team. We are almost all grant funded positions. So we've kind of built this program over time. It does also include our green infrastructure team that also includes a lot of grant funded positions through the EPA and other state grants. The right 2/3 of this photo are funded by the state as part of our disaster assessment and recovery unit. So these are extension agents supported by the state dollars.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. We should probably move on to the next speaker.
Yep, sure thing.
But for all of you, if you have more questions, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. Okay. All right. Sherry, you are up.
Great, thank you. I'm Sherry Gruder with UW-Madison Extension. Even though we're called Madison Extension, we're actually statewide. And I'm a LEED accredited professional building design and construction. I'm the sustainable design specialist, statewide specialist. I'm also the energy program manager for a program called Energy on Wisconsin. And I'm a member of UW Extension's climate leadership team. The team is a cross-institutional team of over 35 members. So I know every extension isn't divided the same way, but we have different institutes. We used to call them program areas. So youth and ag and community development and families. And so we see climate, obviously, and climate resilience moving across all those areas. And so we work together to do programming. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is the community climate resilience menu that a subsection of our team developed. And we did that also with students in classes at University of Wisconsin in Stevens Point, where Anna is. And it was actually a class that she had and another professor had. And so we used it kind of as a project for them and then kind of reworked it after they graduated. So we published the menu in late 21. The team is funded through our dean. And so we're kind of under that auspice. And the menu is an online tool of resources. It addresses ag and food systems, the built and natural environment, and energy efficiency and renewable energy. The menu is geared to local government staff, officials, and those supporting informed decision-making, like extension, regional planners, and concerned organizations. It's a dynamic changing menu, and it can provide information about our climate impacts and resilience strategies to consider throughout ongoing decision-making and planning. What you see here is the three areas, and then each of the menus has choices that you can make or look at for actions where you'll find resources. So it starts with equity and environmental justice, which we recommend that people use throughout whatever they're doing. So that would be ubiquitous. Then we have education and information, then low-cost strategies, significant resource deployment, so large projects actually, then celebrating successes and grants and funding. And so I think what's important here is that the menu is geared, just like we just heard about Texas's program, to meet communities where they are. And that's regardless of the level of staffing they have, whether they're early in planning or they have multiple plans, the funding that they have available to them, et cetera. But it provides customization to assist them with their local environment, culture, and economy. Okay, next slide. So what I thought I would do is, rather than zipping around on a website, I just took screenshots of parts of the menu, and I thought I'd just go through energy resilience with you. And okay, so energy resilience menu is divided into assessment and planning, energy efficiency, renewable energy generation, and energy resilience. And so it's not all about resilience, but the fact is that with energy, especially, what you work on for mitigation is also an adaptation strategy a lot of the time. So they're really all interconnected. And so if we could have the next slide. So if you just look at the graph, and you're not really supposed to be able to read it, but the blue blob is the impacts of climate emissions, is the electricity generation. So you can see that contributes highly. And then transportation is red above it. So between the two, energy is a huge chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions. And then they're also, very much impacted by severe weather events. So what I'm going to do is take you through, as if I'm an official looking at the menu, and under energy, and energy in a flooding event. So what happens with when we have severe flooding to our power, what can happen to our power systems? And I'm sure, unfortunately, many of you have experienced this in your states around the country. Okay, next slide. So just as a basis for what happens is that the electric grid is increasingly vulnerable to disruptions and prolonged power outages. And renewable energy that's built locally is more resilient to power outages. So that's what we're trying, and the resilience part to flooding, what we're trying to help communities with. And flooding causes lack of power, which can take lives. It impacts people's health. People lose their food. Their refrigerators and freezers go off, and then that becomes an economic issue for them as well as a health issue. It impairs their ability to get drinking water or clean water, because of course that takes electricity to pump the water out of the wells and also to run the wastewater treatment plants. And then people lose connectivity with each other. And then it also impacts the economy, especially, you know, when it lasts a long time. So what you see is a picture on the bottom left is the first solar system that was put up on Madeline Island, which is on Lake Superior, northern Wisconsin. And their idea was, you know, we're totally isolated, and when the grid goes down, we're in trouble. So they started building and putting solar arrays all over the island on buildings and then ground mounted, with the idea of building a microgrid or grid connecting them or adding battery storage, but a way to be resilient to power outages on the island. And then the bottom right picture is solar on a house and on a farm, a working farm that actually is called Perfection Produce. And one of our extension educators in southern Wisconsin, it's their business, and I'll show you later a picture of a ground mount array that they have to help power the greenhouse. So, you know, we're seeing it at a government level, at a community level, and at the business level, and also at the individual level. Okay, next slide. So when we have someone who's interested in, well, what is solar plus storage? We send them to the planning for power outages and low cost strategies part of the menu. And what you see here is actually a screenshot of what they would read under viewing low cost strategies. And this sends them to this particular resource, which is Understanding Solar and Storage. And it's a really great resource, by the way, but you know, it lets them start to understand you know, what they should be measuring, what they should be looking at, etc. So we figure that doing that is low cost. Okay, next slide. Then again, we try to talk about equity throughout and have them consider that. And, you know, connectivity is an issue. So here we send them to actually, on the Energy on Wisconsin website, there's a projects page, and there are also blog posts about what's going on and what's possible, and they're by topic area. And here, the picture on the left is actually something that just came out last month in the city of Racine, Wisconsin, which is near Milwaukee, where they paired solar plus storage on a little free library. And so what that does is it enables people, even when the power is out, to charge their phones. And they can be iPhones or you know, other phones as well. But it was put together with the idea of community input. And what we found was that homeless people seem to have phones and they were charging them, and students who are displaced were charging their phones. And this was done with the engineering department at UW-Madison, as well as some nonprofit organizations. Another thing that resource we point them to is a case study, and sorry if you can hear my dog, in a case study in Viroqua, Wisconsin, where due to flooding, they were out of energy for almost 5 days. And so the community got together and said they never wanted to be in that position again. And a local inn, the local library, and then someone at their house put in Tesla power walls, which are a form of battery to store solar, so that there would be community ability to connect when the power's down, which really helps a lot with people's safety as well. So anyway, the resources in the menu bring them to other resources that help them figure out paths that they can take. You know, another way they can do this is through community solar, and we're now seeing local utilities along with the communities trying to get grant money to put in storage with their community solar projects. Okay, next slide. Another part of the menu is funding. It's great to have all the ideas, but how do you pay for them? And in especially in a state like Wisconsin, where we have basically the utilities are supported by the Public Service Commission. We're a regulated state. We don't have free markets when it comes to energy. So we do send them to funding resources. And in the case of energy, here was one listing. So what you see on the left is what they see on the menu, which is viewing grants and funding. If they click on this one, they clicked on Energy on Wisconsin funding opportunities. And here's one for rural areas, which was a USDA rural energy pilot program, and connects them to that resource and gives them dates and information about it. So basically, this is the way all of the menus work, is that they might be divided into different subject areas, but so the one for the built environment and green infrastructure is actually more based on the type of disaster that would be encountered. But then underneath are each of these same categories, and then they can find the resources that they need. Okay, and then final slide. So again, the resilience menu that we developed is a living document. We plan to put in more resources. We'll obviously need to upgrade them. We'd love any feedback that you might have, any information as to additions that we might want to consider. And then if you do decide to use it, which you know, this one is more geared to Wisconsin, although a lot of the links in there aren't. They're national links. Then you know, we'd love to hear how you've used it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I think Anna could answer some too as well.
I can't see anything, so I had to turn that off. Are there any questions? There is a question in here about the charm workshops. Okay. Sorry. Oh, Sherry, there is a question. How big a job will keep, well, you know, to maintain this menu?
Thanks, David. You know, it will be. Our climate leadership team is made up of people who have other positions in extension. So we don't have yet, although we did try to hire a climate specialist for our state. And we're hoping that, you know, a lot of that would happen through that person, and then through interns and, you know, others that we might be able to bring into the program. So at this point, it's just us. So, you know, Anna and I are both specialists. We have a lot of county-based faculty and educators who are part of it. And I just think as they come to find the resources, then, you know, they'll add them. And it is housed on our community right now under Community Economic Development in our Community Development Institute on our website. We also have a Community Climate Connections website that we've recently developed for our team and extensions in Wisconsin's climate work. So these are both fairly new and recently launched. So that's kind of where they're situated now. And we're kind of minding our own shop. Our Ag Institute has their own climate team, some of which are part of our team. And then they are upgrading their own on a regular basis.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry. I know. I think maintaining a curated resource like this is definitely a challenge. And so, yeah, we've talked about, particularly through me, the Center for Land Use Education, having a student go through regularly to just check on the links. But then relying on us, the specialists, to add new links as well. We're also trying to figure out the governance side of this. We had somebody ask if they could kind of add their own project to the menu. And so we don't have policies around like, oh, what actually gets added if you're an outside extension person. So we're trying to figure that out. How much work do you think it would be to nationalize this work?
Whoa.
I know. So on part of I think what Sherry had said is that there are a lot of resources that are already appropriate for anywhere, pretty much. But we do have particular resources that are Wisconsin based. So our Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, we have a new assessment report out. So we rely heavily on that to explain what's going on in Wisconsin. So there's probably pieces of it that could be replaced at a state level.
Or there could be a map that you click on the states and it would take you to at least the climate related information for that state, like what we use wiki information, and in different states it could take you to wherever that is housed. But then maybe the rest of it could be applicable and used.
Well, good. Thank you for those questions. And yeah, we probably should move on to the next speaker.
I'm here. Should I go ahead and start sharing my screen?
Yes, Brian, please. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Does that still look like the same way that we practice it?
Looks good. If you just want to hit hide on the little bar on the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
That's right. I just saw it. All right. Thank you. Well, thanks everybody. My name is Brian Hallett. I'm a principal engineer at Reliability First, and Reliability First is a nonprofit corporation that exists to fulfill our mission of ensuring the reliability, security, and resilience of the electric grid. We serve a footprint that's kind of along the Great Lakes, but we're just one of the 6 companies in North America that have the same mission. My background's been focused on electrical engineering, mostly transmission planning and model building, but I've recently been focusing on learning and practicing systems engineering. I'm a board member of the Northeast Ohio chapter of INCOSE, which is the International Council of Systems Engineering, which is an international professional organization of systems engineering professionals. Being in Northeast Ohio, it's mostly members from Reliability First. There's members from the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland. Philips Electronics has a large footprint in the Cleveland area, so it's mostly focused on those professionals in the northeast part of Ohio. But as a group, we were looking for ways that we can apply systems engineering concepts to complex problems. So we started looking at ways that we can apply these tools and skills to help aid communities. So a colleague of mine, Carl Dister, and I attended the 2019 Community Development Society conference in Missouri, and we met a lot of great extension professionals from all over the Midwest, and that eventually led to our collaboration with Myra Moss and Eric Romick at the OSU Extension offices. And this is a kind of a project that we've been collaborating on. So this is, you can kind of see at the top of the slide, collaboration between INCOSE, Ohio State, University Extension Services Reliability First, and then Games Done Legit and Metopia are two vendors that also help with this project. And so I'll just go right into the slides. I think we're a little tight on time. This is our attempt to use the systems engineering approach to help society as a whole. And we normally break down problems. Systems engineers love to create models. We call these maturity models, where you have an ultimate goal, and then you break the problem or goal down into different categories, and then break that down further into processes, and then do evaluations. But one of our other favorite things to do is to then try to tailor this approach to different scenarios. So here I'm focusing on now community resilience is our topic, and now we're trying to break community resilience down into focus areas that then can further be broken down into activities that we can then evaluate and come up with capability scores. So when you look at what we try to accomplish with these models is we want to make sure that the model is holistic, that we're completely covering the topic. And then we also want to gauge interconnectivity between the focus areas, so you can see where there's interdependencies, and then that can lead to efficiencies in our processes. So what you might be scratching your head saying, why reliability first? Why systems engineers? And how would you apply this to communities? Well, our essential purpose statement is to serve the public good by protecting, improving, and ensuring the availability of electricity for all, to sustain health and safety, safeguard the economy, and preserve our way of life. And I think, as you can see, these are very common themes that the last two presenters talked about as well. So I think that there are a lot of commonalities between this specific project and some of the other extension office projects. And then down below are some of our objectives. And again, I think a lot of these have been echoed. But I think probably maybe the first one, I'm not going to read out all of these, but just gaining a better understanding of a community's current level of resiliency and preparedness is a really big part of what this tool is geared to do. And then as they go through the process, actualize some of these other objectives. So this is kind of a map of the entire process that we would work through with the community. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, the first part is a profile. So we actually do some action research on communities before we start to engage with them, to gain a better understanding of the makeup of the communities. Once we do that research, that helps us scope and set up the tools for the engagement. One of the tools I'll talk about here on a future slide. And then we perform outreach. So we're going to reach out to leaders or people in the community that we think might be champions for the overall project. We then perform a form of training, which we actually have transformed into an interactive learning game. So the interactive learning game kind of teaches some of the systems engineering concepts that's needed for the project. And we also perform an appraisal. And after we go through that step with the community, we then do a report out of our findings, hopefully help the community come up with an action plan, and then perform follow-up as we monitor their progress on that action plan. And then at the end, we'll take lessons learned to help refine our process and make our process more streamlined for the next community that we want to work with. So to target which communities we want to work with, we're focusing, this is the footprint for reliability first. It's approximately 13 states. We use a heat map. The upper left-hand corner is a heat map that is based on calculating or trying to estimate the likelihood of a potential outage. This is based off of historical reliability numbers and also a number of physical assets. This is at the county level, and then the distance between large cities. Then on the right-hand side, we also tried to map using open source data what we feel a community's ability to mitigate a long 3-week potential blackout or power outage. So this is looking at things like unemployment rates, disability rates, GDP, number of acres per citizen, access to water, broadband. Then we combine those two maps to come up with a composite map, which we feel is representative of what's the risk of a potential blackout occurring, combined with what is the ability of the county's likelihood to be able to mitigate that type of event. And so on this heat map, if it shows up as fairly dark, that would mean there's a higher residual risk, and those would be the areas that we want to focus on first. And then again, I was mentioned it earlier. We created an interactive learning game to help facilitate, getting community members up to speed with these systems engineering concepts. And this was quite a project within a project. And really that the goal here is that we're going to select people from the community to fill predefined roles. So the roles are groups of people that we felt like holistically should represent the community as a whole. So that would include administrators, citizens, people in leadership positions, cultural builders, economy builders, safety, utilities and environment, and then wellness providers. So those people have to manage both an amount of money that they start the game off with, as well as resources that are shared on the community level. So this is, I guess, kind of a game board, not the board that someone would play, but it's a game map that would show sort of the strategy. So you have the players in the middle, and they're taking their money and then the shared community resources, and they're playing off of a larger board where actions take place. That's the red cards. There are events that happen that might impact a community, and then players have to decide with some of these action cards that they start with how they're going to create a strategy to overcome the events that take place. So there's a couple of other layers of strategy in here, but really what the game teaches is that you're part of the community and that you can kind of create projects or initiate projects that are solely beneficial for yourself, or you also have the option to choose projects that are also beneficial for the community. So it teaches, I think, through the gameplay where there's ways that you can both achieve what you're trying to achieve as well as meet the community goals, and you can see how those are interrelated. And then the game and I guess the appraisal process is all based around that model that I talked about on the first slide. And to develop this model, we reviewed over 37 different maturity models, and also different methods to appraise communities or organizations. These are just a few of them, and a lot of these different models are ones that were suggested to us when we went to the CDS conference in Missouri. And we also had some conference calls with folks like the extension services at Purdue University, Bo LeBeau and his group, and then they referred us to Myra and the OSU extension folks. And then we had several calls, actually all day calls, to go through the model that we came up with and talk about pros and cons and make sure that we were sort of hitting the mark, and that the OSU extension folks, Myra and Eric, gave us a level of a peer review of our model. So that the model that we came up with is focused around these 9 practices. I'm not going to maybe go through all of them, but we just feel that if a community looked at these 9 practices and evaluated themselves, that these are practices that would lead towards a certain level of resilience. And the mechanics of the game actually come up with a way to calculate a number of approximately how many days the community may be resilient in the face of a large-scale power outage. But the community is actually going to be taking an assessment to come up with the scores in those different practice areas, and we use an online evaluation tool that's been developed by the company Metovia, so that the people in the community will be assigned certain assessments to take. The assessment will have a question that they need to answer. There's a scale of maybe what their maturity would look like in this area, and then they would give themselves a score and then provide in the comment field the rationale for why they gave themselves that score. And then at the end of the evaluation, the scores across all those different focus areas are then tabulated, and you come up with an overall report out that would look something like this. This is a simplified scale. So what we're going to try to capture here are the observed strengths to share, where maybe one member in the community who's filling one of those roles is doing something very, very well and could maybe share those practices with other people in the community. Just ways to share those institutional knowledge and strengths. Also, as we compare their capabilities against the model, it becomes easy to find areas for improvement, easy wins when comparing where you're at today versus those higher levels of capability. And at the end, really using that strategy of working together and coming up with maybe the projects that make the most sense for the community based on those interdependencies, making a roadmap for improvement. Then there's the systems engineering portion is really some of the math behind the game that maps the interdependencies between those focus areas. We use a design structure matrix at a very high level to map out the high level interdependencies, and then we break it down to the activity level to show where one activity is dependent on another. And then at the end, we have a series of checking the scores that people give themselves as far as capability against kind of a potential maximum score they should have based on other areas. And so we really use this tool to help with sort of in the background, doing some analysis and checking results to make sure that we're confident with the analysis. So I know it was kind of quick and it gets somewhat technical there at the end, but that's kind of the approach that we're taking. And I know with the topic of this, this conference of land use, you might say, well, how does this relate? And I think when a community works with defining where their resilience is today and what's an acceptable level of resilience, it may lead them down the path of wanting to, as maybe one of those previous presentations showed, when you realize that you were completely dependent upon the utility, you could maybe take matters and decide that you want to take matters into your own hands. You could take on a project such as a solar plus battery, or maybe reach out to the utility for a backup service connection point, or maybe there could be a lot of different possibilities there that might involve land use. But another benefit besides mapping out those specific projects is just the connections that you make within the community when going through a project like this. I think that the communication is going to be key, and learning more about how the community functions and is interconnected will really be a great output from the entire activity. So that was all I had. I guess if you guys have any questions, or if there's anything from that you'd like to talk more about, be willing to do that. And Myra Moss can obviously help me out, jump in if you know any of the answers to the questions.
I had a question. Have
Sure.
you used the game in communities? And my second question was, how does a community find out about playing the game using this resource?
Yeah, with the company that I work for, we were shut down as far as travel during the pandemic, and so we've been refining the tools, and we have demoed the tool twice internal to my company, and then we had a demo that extended out. Myra actually participated in the last demo, as well as other folks that were not part of the project. I guess sort of like an acceptance testing type process, and we felt like that went really well. And we're actually performing outreach in that whole process diagram. We're in the outreach phase right now, reaching out to our first set of communities that what we're considering our pilot communities, trying to get someone to commit to going forward with the whole process.
Yeah, and one thing we've done too is we've presented this via posters at a number of different conferences in the last year, because what we're hoping will come out of this is a collaborative model between Extension and Reliability First or other similar organizations throughout the country, because it really is a way for communities to directly address the impact of long-term power outages and to kind of deal with them beforehand and have mitigation strategies and build resilience in the community that can, help contend with that before it happens. So, and it raises people's level of awareness. It was a great opportunity to bring together community development professionals, who are working kind of in local communities with engineering systems people in the energy industry who knew that side of it. So it was a really good combination of different kinds of skills.
Yeah, it's all interesting. I'm interested in games and how those could be used in communities. I've developed one And yeah, it's been face to face, and you know, over the pandemic, you can't do that. So I've been trying to put it online, which that's a whole other thing.
That's funny. We went down
Um,
a similar path. We have very stringent requirements as far as cybersecurity, and we were not allowed to go directly to a virtual or an online game. So we created the paper, in-person version to work out the mechanics of the game to make sure that it played correctly, and then hopefully with a few successes in that face-to-face environment, we can then move forward with maybe making it a digital version that would maybe be easier to share.
sure. Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know about all of you, but when I was listening to all three of these, I was like, oh gosh, if we could package all of these up and share it out, like here's the package. Because I think it covers like communities in different phases, the mapping, anyway, I was like, oh, yeah, there's a lot here, and it all hits communities maybe at different places. I love the mapping piece. Anyway, I was just thinking about like, oh, how do we get this all in one big package? So
I thought it was interesting, Brian, how your game got at people thinking about making choices that would help them at the individual level versus at the community level, or I think especially in times of disaster, people are thinking of self-preservation, but in advance, this is a better advanced planning tool, right? So it would be good to actually get them at both levels. That was interesting. I don't know, why you did that, but I think it could be really useful.
Well, the idea with that, your overall community is being assessed against a model, is that there can be areas in that model, those focus areas, where you're being held back because they're interconnected to the other areas. If you have a very low score in one area, that low score is going to impede you from getting a higher score in the other areas. So when we play collaboratively, your community might really benefit the most from a project in that focus area that you really don't have a stake in, or it's not an interest to you. But if you're all competing over the same funding, by using the model approach, you can see where this not only provides benefit for this one area. So we're categorizing these projects, and it's an area of the most need, but it also, as we complete this project, some of our other capabilities will go up because they're no longer limited by that low score and that kind of that lowest common denominator. So yeah, we feel like that was a big benefit of people to, as they go through it, start to realize that there's connections there. I'm glad you like that, because that's the systems engineering part that we really tried to to focus on. So that's great.
I'm a systems person, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So we just have a couple minutes left. Does anyone else have one more question? Comment?
I'd like to be able to try both of those tools here. So I don't know if, how possible that is, but I think they'd both be really fun and useful to try to pilot somewhere else.
That's right.
And I don't know, the Texas one seems really like built into all your conditions there. And you've zoomed in on the map and you have everything worked out in terms of risks. And so maybe that would be a little bit harder, but I don't know.
So part of it is, we did design it to be sort of scalable. So, I mean, I put in the chat that we've done some other work in other states, but, as a whole, the platform should be able to grow. I mean, I think just if it could be visualized in GIS, we can work with that. So a lot of our work's focused so far on, flooding, because we've done a lot of coastal work, a lot of work supported by FEMA for flooding. But not a whole lot saying that we can't do wildfires or other sort of applications too. Yeah, so there's definitely a bit of logic there, but yeah, the goal is to be able to expand the capabilities of it depending on the local needs. But if we're ever up in Wisconsin, I'll be sure to let y'all know. I don't think we've got anything planned in Ohio yet, though. But AS50M's up in Madison, so they've got some reach there.
Well,
I'll definitely have to.
we have the Great Lakes.
Yes.
I'll definitely have to get some outside help to be able to make the game available, a digital version. Because if we leave it up to me and my skills in like Excel, it'll take the rest of my
Right.
lifetime to get. I need
I
a developer.
know, no doubt. All right, Andrew, do we have any last messages for anybody, or as we wrap up here?
See, we will work on making the presentations available, if that's okay with the presenters. If folks have questions, we can work to send out the slides as PDFs to everyone. We did record most of the presentations, so we will also work on finding a way to get that posted and available for your colleagues that weren't able to make it today. I think other than that, hope to see a number of y'all in Indianapolis next month, and I think that's all I can think of. Anna, Myra, anything else?
No, but
this
thank
one-
you to all three of you for presenting. Much
Yes.
appreciated and really informative.
Very much so. Thank you.
Thanks. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.
Thank you all.
All right. Bye. Thank you.